Hello, and welcome to the College Board Search webinar, Search Best Practices, Creating Standing Orders. We will be recording today's session, and we'll email you after the webinar along with the slide deck and some additional information. Thanks for joining us today. We know your time is valuable, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Carolyn Knowles-Sorg. I'll be moderating today's session along with my colleague, Mark Barrett. Mark and I are both former enrollment managers who now work with search users on optimization strategies. And we're so glad to be joined today by Eric Johnson, Director of Admissions at the Oregon Institute of Technology, or Oregon Tech. I've had the pleasure of working with Eric on search since 2018, and as you'll hear in this session, he's led a lot of progress at his institution in this short time. Before we turn it over to Eric, Mark and I are going to set the stage with a quick review of how search works. We'll then hand it off to Eric, who will walk you through his process at Oregon Tech. First, with an overview of his goals and strategic priorities, then the approach he takes to identifying and licensing every student in search who meets his criteria as they become available using standing orders. Successful search is not just about licensing effectively, so even though that's a really big part of it, but it's also about what you do next. So Eric will walk us through the process he takes after receiving his College Board search output files. Oregon Tech uses Slate in the delivery of campaigns, so I know other Slate users tuning in today will enjoy this part of Eric's story very much. And finally, Eric will review his results. What he has to share there is pretty remarkable. The chat and Q&A boxes are open, so you can use either to send us your questions, and we'll address as many as we can during and following the presentation. And another quick reminder, if you're just joining us, that we will provide today's slide deck and recording to all participants. Oregon Tech understands the way search works, and they have developed a masterful approach to making the most of it. So that all are on the same page in understanding the rationale for why Oregon Tech approaches search the way they do, let's review how search works now. This is a pretty big shift from the way search worked not too long ago, so we want to be sure to help you flag any outdated ideas you may have about search and make room for new ways of thinking. A student can opt into search today more ways than ever before. They might opt in while researching college on Big Future and saving a college list. On collegeboard.org, they might choose to opt in when invited while creating their account, registering for a weekend SAT, checking assessment scores for PSAT, SAT, or AP, or even when linking their Khan Academy account to their College Board account to begin official SAT practice. Or, as in the past, they may continue to opt in during the pre-administration session for an exam being given at school, like the PSAT, PSAT 10, SAT School Day, or AP. Regardless of how a student opts in, the student is added to the search database. From the top left, look to the bottom left on this flow chart. In the case of online opt-in channels, students are added through a weekly process we call indexing. We add students to search now whether or not they have a prior assessment. When a student opts in for the first time during an exam, they'll be added to search during the data load for that exam. Now, moving along the bottom of the slide to the right, you can then license and connect with those students. When a student has already been added to search and they take an assessment, those scores will be appended to their existing search record on the data load for that assessment. Keep in mind that many students opting in online do actually have College Board assessments associated with their record. So for example, if you set your calendar by the PSAT data load in the past and you ordered one time a year in January, you'd never find the PSAT test taker who opted in online after the data load. So there are two big takeaways here. First, every student used to have an assessment on their search record, and that's no longer the case. And second, because that's no longer the case, your focus on data loads as search events needs to change to a consistent process. This will give you the opportunity to talk to students sooner when they first opt in and when they're paying the closest attention. And this is why we invited Eric to join us today to talk with you about how standing orders drive his search strategy. Mark is going to add a little more color to this chart on the next slide, and then we'll hand it off to Eric after that.
So we've talked a lot recently about the way students are entering the search database and the growth of the search database. And as Carolyn was describing, a key aspect of that growth is via this process we call indexing. So what you need to know about indexing is that it really reflects student behavior. Why does indexing reflect student behavior, you might be asking? It's because indexing adds students to the database at the time they opt in. It doesn't wait for scheduled data load days. So when you license names frequently and consistently, like you'll hear Eric talk about today, you're letting student engagement drive your search behavior. So indexing of students into search, as you can see on this slide, has grown each cohort in significant ways. Since indexing is an ongoing process, you'll notice hundreds of thousands of students enter search this way week by week. Now, it's true that indexing has always been important, and savvy search users are aware of this, but it's taken on even greater importance since last October. Some of this new volume is indicative of a policy change to loading student records immediately at opt-in, but we've also created new opt-in opportunities for students, such as, for example, students' ability to build a college list at opt-in. So it's really important to understand how indexing impacts search in order to take advantage of the data. So as you look at this slide, you can see cohort volume across the top. For each cohort, we've broken down the number of students who entered search via a data load and the number who entered via indexing. For example, in the class of 2021, of the 2.3 million students available, 1.4 million students entered the database via a data load and about 873,000 via indexing. Since October, however, only 51,000 entered via data load, while 148,000 entered via indexing. And the number of students entering search in the 2022, 2023, and 2024 cohorts from indexing are even more significant. So what does all this mean? It means that data load gain, while important, should not be the sole focus of your search efforts. Instead, get ahead of your competitors and order names every month so that you're always talking to students when they are new and most receptive to hearing from you. In other words, reach out to the students when they make themselves available in search instead of waiting until the next data load. And the final takeaway I'll leave you here with is that despite all the challenges and interruptions of COVID, the search database is more than 4.6 million students strong, and we expect continued growth in the cohorts week over week.
Now I'd like to turn it over to our colleague, Eric Johnson. Eric has served as Director of Admissions at Oregon Tech since 2018. Since he's been there, he's presided over historic growth. Prior to his post at Oregon Tech, Eric served in varying roles at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and Northern Arizona University. He's an alum, both bachelor's and master's, of Northern Arizona. Eric, it's all yours.
Thank you for that introduction, Carolyn. Oregon Tech is Oregon's polytechnic university. We're nationally ranked and recognized in engineering, several health programs, and we have many unsung heroes in our program mix that produce impressive outcomes in salaries and job placements. Oregon Tech is a small, mighty, and complex institution with our residential campus in Klamath Falls, online program offerings, a commuter campus in the Portland metro area, as well as a campus at the Boeing manufacturing plant in Seattle, Washington. Our total headcount of 5,400 has been fueled in recent years by non-degree seeking high school dual credit students over the last decade or so. You can see the volatility of the full-time freshmen in the chart in front of you back to 1996. I understood what search was and the importance of messaging around it from my previous experience in communications and data management at my previous institutions. Top priority in my first 100 days at Oregon Tech was launching senior, sophomore, and junior search using College Board segment analysis. Note the spike in new freshmen in 2012 in front of you. It was the only year search was done, and it was the only year since the 1980s that Oregon Tech exceeded 400 new freshmen. The long-term goal is to go from the slide you see in front of you here to this, so that we landed about 2,000 additional degree-seeking students by 2028. About 4 or 5 years ago, the Oregon Public University system broke up, so none of the 7 universities are governed by the same board at the state level here in Oregon. Oregon Tech has a new independent board and president. The top priority of the board and our president is enrollment, fueled primarily by aggressive year-over-year growth of first-time freshmen, coupled with improvements in retention. Not only is the board and president new, but 4 of our 5 senior administrators are also new, all coming from institutions that experienced significant enrollment growth over the last 1 to 2 decades. The growth mindset has certainly taken root here at Oregon Tech, including all of the exciting changes of new system implementations and integrations needed to fuel year-over-year growth sustainably. Our market data suggests a general lack of awareness of the Oregon Tech brand, confusion as a vocational or trade school, with the strongest recognition in Southern Oregon, Upper Northern California, Washington, the Reno, Nevada area, and some suburbs of the Portland metro area. I like to think of Oregon Tech as the people's polytechnic. It's a great option for the AB average student. Our median household incomes are in the $50,000 to $60,000 ranges, and our students often are not the straight A students landing in the 90th percentile on every exam, characteristic of the academic profiles you might find in other polytechnic institutions. Our students work hard for their 1080 to 1260 SAT or 3.5 cumulative high school GPA. About 70% bring in college credit. And though they are not for the most part competing for top spots at the big polytechnics, they'll likely have at least one job waiting for them when they graduate with a starting salary of about $60,000 to $70,000 a year. Given the demand of STEM programs, the strong value proposition, Oregon Tech ought to be a land of abundance with milk and honey flowing through campus. However, investments to modernize the admissions shop, institute best practices in search and recruitment, and a lot of heavy lifting on system implementations, integrations, and data management has been needed to get us on the right track. To give you some perspective on this point, back in 2018, my budget was 7 figures lower than it is now, so I had to make a results first case for increased budget by solving for X. Rather than asking for a budget in April of 2018 to do search, I set enrollment targets and worked backwards to what 10, 15, and 20% growth would look like in terms of top of the funnel volume. From there, I was approved a modest budget increase of $50,000 to contract with College Board search, segment analysis, and enrollment planning services, in addition to about 25,000 new names to license that included seniors, juniors, and sophomores. Summer 2018, we used segment analysis, historical tagging of several years worth of applicant data to identify the top educational neighborhoods and high school clusters to understand how the birds of a feather flock together within our primary Oregon and secondary WUI markets. I think it is important to point out here that I am no data scientist and that in these first few months at Oregon Tech, not only was I learning the institution, but I had a learning curve on fundamentals like data scrubbing and basic file formatting required to meet the minimum specs to perform historical tagging out of a less than user-friendly CRM that basically had dupes everywhere. I like to point this out because if a political philosophy major like me, who barely knew filters, sorts, and basic pivots in Excel, could learn the data fundamentals to leverage segment analysis, anyone really can. Looking back on it, I laugh at myself because I didn't even know how to format the file with leading zeros. Carolyn and the College Board were invaluable at this time to help me gain the skill set needed to ensure data integrity to make segment analysis work. Main takeaway here is you do not need a background in IT, data science, or programming to build a solid search strategy using segment analysis. Educational neighborhood 83 and high school cluster 65 is our primary market powerhouse. This cluster combo produced about 50% of our incoming freshman class of Oregonians based on the first historical reports produced from segment analysis. Due to budget uncertainty as a new director at the time, unfamiliarity with building search orders, and with a deprecated CRM, I was reluctant to set up standing orders over the summer of 2018 in my first 100 days. We did some single orders of sophomores, juniors, and seniors late summer, early fall, based upon the top clusters, test score bands aligned with our admissions criteria at the time, first choice programs selected, and verified email, which produced some much needed volume early in application season and inquiries by November. I did go old school and we did a print-based sophomore junior campaign to Oregon 8365 combo, which produced an influx of care-off responses that admissions office here has never seen before. The early app year-over-year margins were very good after the November priority date, but it became clear we were missing students because I was over-filtering in primary and secondary markets. First by the cluster combos, then the test scores, verified email, and first choice program. With some feedback from Carolyn's free consultations, it became clear that I was diminishing the power of our 8365 cluster combo by filtering along test score bands and program. Also, I had missed the December names because I had not set up standing orders and I was simply spread too thin to place a single order on an ongoing basis at that time. However, by the biggest load in January, I had configured standing orders to produce greater volume. I got away from test score bands in our primary Oregon market to pick up more names with the powerhouse 8365 combo. I also dropped test score bands in secondary markets and switched to the logic of verified email or address as we worked around unsustainable email delivery deliverability, and a busted CRM. I also moved away from first choice program filters for greater volume of juniors and sophomores. A farmer metaphor is quite apt here. Like a farmer who cultivates the crop year-round to maximize yield, making adjustments to search filters early and setting up standing orders gives you many times in the year to review the performance of your search. Like the changing of seasons or weather, the standing order notifications you get before sunrise is the trigger to walk your fields, tend to your crop, and sprinkle in some added fertilizer to your campaigns. Like farming and cultivating a crop, search is an ongoing process to maximize yield. A farmer does not merely plant a seed and expect a killer yield the following year. Tending to the crop, working the fields, monitoring pests, these are all analogous to the type of work needed to building a successful search strategy using standing orders. I want to mention here that we were not building a search strategy with a reliable CRM like Slate at the time. I inherited a broken CRM that was very limited in its top of the funnel management, messaging, and reporting. Rolling into early yield season of fall 2019, and as we prep for launching Slate that March, standing orders across seniors, sophomores, and juniors in primary and secondary markets were set. Important to note that I only had a $50,000 strategic investment at the time, which included the subscription to segment analysis service and enrollment planning service. This meant I had to be on point and calculated to limit volume across 8 standing orders to stay within budget. When placing the orders, it was critical to do a basic calculation of names times 0.47 to limit the order without blowing the budget. Had I just accepted the measly budget I had inherited when I started in April of 2019, no way would we have had the early results to demonstrate ROI for fall 2019. Of course, it certainly helped to have segment analysis available and all its graphs to show how we could put ourselves on track for the greatest increase in freshmen in 3 decades. The historical tagging report and review of our data was an easy approval for a modest investment by a board and president that wanted the trifecta of more students who are academically qualified and of a diverse class. Successful search is only as good as the messaging around it, and your messaging is only as good as delivering it by the right channel to the right audience at the right time. Despite our CRM challenges, we had impressive results from sophomore junior mailing in September of 2018 that came from one single order in Oregon Combo Cluster 8365. Our fall 2019 app numbers were impressive, on track for the greatest increase in new students in 30 years, and one of the largest freshman classes since the 80s. Before implementing Slate in March of 2019, our standing orders were successful in adding new names, not just for our app gen strategy, but as we were gearing up to host new types of off and on-campus events during spring recruitment in yield season. My point here is, regardless of your CRM, even if quite dysfunctional like ours, a solid search strategy built on standing orders provides new names to engage on an ongoing basis that moves the needle in the right direction. Launching robust campaigns were among the top priorities of our Slate implementation in late 2019. With our success from search out of an unreliable CRM, I was eager to level up our search with increased segmentation across all cohorts by our top cluster combos in primary, secondary markets, and leveraging all the integrated objects of Slate to deliver robust first-in-box messaging on an ongoing basis throughout the cycle. We all know that placing an order and getting names is one thing. Importing them quickly at 100% integrity to turn around relevant, personalized messaging is a whole other item. The screenshot in front of you is from upload dataset in our Slate instance. At any given time, we're running 12 to 22 standing orders configured to deliver new names as the data loads or on a monthly basis, depending on the market, cohort, particular segment, assessment, and various other variables that feed into our segmented orders. Slate provides a standard source format for student search service that is easily modified to map custom fields to ensure effective targeting across our 4 main campaigns: term, program, educational neighborhood, high school cluster, most recent college board exam, and advanced placement tests are some of the custom fields mapped on the standard format in our Slate instance. As new names arrive, the process to load a name is as simple as exporting your files from College Board and then dragging and dropping your standing orders in the Slate source format. In Slate speak, a person record is a prospect, inquiry, or applicant. Out-of-the-box search matching and person status rules prevent dupes, and fuzzy matches are easily resolved using consolidated records. I mentioned before that Oregon Tech is a small, mighty, and in terms of our various enrollment streams, a complex institution. So it is imperative to maintain clean, actionable data on the person record at the top of the funnel. For example, we have a very large high school dual credit population who by standard slate rules classify these students as applicants. But using rules and automations, we've configured custom person status rules that keep these records as inquiries so that when a dual credit record is imported from search, we update the record with College Board data at our inquiry level messaging. We refer to our sophomore junior search campaign as Spark of Response, and I included a shot of its branding here. Records for this campaign are identified by rather simple filter criteria. Most importantly, having a person status of prospect with a call to action of respond. Using population rules, all of these records also live in various populations. Most importantly, program clusters that drive our inquiry nurturing drip campaigns or senior names that drive our targeted app gen campaigns. Building orders by verified address or email address, we target names accordingly to ensure the first search message is the appropriate channel for delivery. But by and large, the first contact is email and some targeted segments will receive a postcard. For example, a junior prospect loaded in December will receive our monthly Spark of Response messaging, our program cluster population driving the inquiry nurturing messaging, and if within certain markets, postcards, email, and maybe even some text around visiting and employment. If this record responds, Slate person rules automatically update the inquiry status, which then meets inquiry level messaging that is heavier on print collateral. I want to mention here that we are also a beta user of Slate Print, which is a new partnership between Technolutions and CountStaff. Leveraging Slate Print, we're able to leverage all of our Slate records with high quality prints at quite reasonable rates using the Slate credits. There's a lot to be said about this inquiry nurturing campaign and generating later responses from records who initially do not respond to our search messaging. By design, inquiry nurturing does not have a specific call to action that triggers a form submission or another type of interaction that would set the record to an inquiry in Slate. Though we're still in our early stages with our new website, we're using Slate Ping to track which pages these students are visiting to flip search non-responders to inquiry status if they hit specific pages over a certain period of time. This brings up an important strategic consideration on the meaning and definition of non-response within the context of your specific strategy that I'll circle back to here in a couple of slides. Our 12 to 22 segmented standing orders are churned through multiple objects within Slate, fueling year-round engagement via multiple channels, all with varying calls to action to names who have not opted out. Obviously, poor data management, tracking, and neglecting to refine campaign messaging will quickly create a messy situation. However, by integrating standing orders into your Slate project and prep plans, it becomes very easy to measure results of your search strategy year-round. The shot in front of you is one of our many variations of our Spark of Response landing page, all of which have the same or very similar form rules, triggered communications, and the same group email. From the first email and postcard to the landing page, the student is receiving consistent branding for the same call to action. And because we know how outdated unpre-populated forms are, we configure all landing pages with a person GUID ID to enhance submissions. We have 12 fields on the form, but we can pre-populate 10 of the required fields based upon the search order. Students can provide optional information, including opting parents in. This sort of integrated approach embraces the complexity of student behavior at the top of the funnel while minimizing the tracking and analysis on the back end. Rather than always asking the question, what is our response rate from new names sent this message on this date? We try to answer a more useful analysis by asking, what is the change in person status over X period of time based upon which messages were sent via what channel and when? While individual response rates by single sends have some value when you run search as an event once or twice a year, you will glean more valuable insights by your search by configuring queries and reports aligned with your year-round search loads and the ongoing campaigns. Next, I'm going to breeze through the results that we have produced since bringing on Search as well as Slate. Given all of our CRM challenges in 2018, our best guess for the size of our inquiry pool was about 1,000 inquiries, and that's probably being generous. By leveraging standing orders and integrating Search and Slate, our fall 22 inquiry pool is on track to be over 750% larger than 2018. Nearly 80% of our responders are actually non-responders of our first 1 to 3 Spark messages targeted at our sophomore and junior search. So if you're measuring your non-responders simply by one email, once the new name is loaded, you'll exclude potential responders to later messaging and might as well be treating these records as opt-outs. I have come to the view that the question, what is your response rate, is less important than answering, what is the change in your person status to inquiry or to applicant from prospect over a period of time. Including our high school dual credit students, nearly 80% of our inquiries are first sourced by College Board. Including our high school dual credit students, over 80% of our inquiries are sourced by College Board. Though we have several inquiry generating partnerships, first source named by College Board remain well over 80%. We also take special attention and care with all search responders with a special gift and personalized letter. For new names by interest in my college, my IMC, we give a special shout out for listing Oregon Tech on their Big Future profile. IMC has performed very well in tertiary markets for us, basically all of our non-WUI states. I caution against using any filters whatsoever if you choose to do IMC. Either from search orders or organic AP score submissions, we send a personalized letter from our college deans to juniors on down with resources on credit for APs by AP score, which we have heard is very valuable to these students in helping build affinity with the institution. Sustained growth in apps and admits. Over the last 3 cycles since launching Search, you'll notice significant growth. As you can imagine, the 265% increase in our admit pool from fall 19 to fall 20 was the hedge we needed to be on track for a strong freshman class against the pandemic. Other important metrics of our admit pool from 19 to 20. The 3.5 average cumulative GPA was maintained. We did not sacrifice the academic quality among our admit pool to fuel that growth. 35% increase in Latinx admits, 175% increase in Native American Pacific Islander, 37% increase in African American, 44% increase in non-resident admits, 35% increase in WUI states that comprise our secondary markets. And currently, fall 21 is trending well, all things considered, with a 9% increase in submitted apps and 2% increase in admitted. Since 2017, we produced a 38% increase in new first-year students. The fall 2020 class diversity profile increased 8%. Net tuition revenue grew over $1 million, and average net tuition per student grew over $2,000 per student. And we nearly doubled our enrollment in the top 3 academic quintiles from fall 2019. No question, the struggle to stay within budget is real. I'm sure that few of us can free ourselves from the shackles of the budget matrix. However, by setting up a simple pivot table to calculate names times 0.47, cross your standing orders, and monitoring your performance within your campaigns, you have built-in safeguards to stay out of the red, and you can bend the spoon on your budget. Volume estimates may be off due to the pandemic, but you can very easily use previous cohorts to approximate standing order volume to stay within your budget. Budget planning for costly print materials is made a bit simpler when your entire search strategy is built on orders as the data loads or monthly. If you are a Slate school, budget building is even easier with Slate credits and Slate print. Finally, if you know the average net tuition revenue per student, you can build very simple graphs for break-even analysis when justifying requests for increased search.
Thank you, Eric, for sharing your story. It's really incredible, the progress that you've made. So we hope you found some good takeaways from the content that was shared. And we think that a few lessons stand out. First, I hope a takeaway is that you can do this. You have the technology and knowledge to move your search efforts to new levels. And as you heard Eric share his data, targeting correctly and searching frequently will help drive ROI and give you the information you need to justify your efforts. It's vital to track effectively and to make in order to make the case to internal stakeholders and others around campus about your efforts. Oregon Tech has built a search mechanism that's based on student engagement at the time students opt in, and they're talking to students when the students want to talk. These efforts, taken together, have helped Oregon Tech grow at a time when many campuses are struggling. So if your search efforts have not evolved, now is the time, and thanks to Eric again for sharing his roadmap to success.
As always, we are here to help you with your search strategy. We are always willing to discuss the right combination of search tools and strategies for your specific institution. So please connect with us if you'd like to find time to update and enhance your search strategy. Our contact information is on the screen. Our consultations are always free and designed to help you get the most out of search. And we will send a follow-up message to everyone here today with a link to schedule time with us or with one of our colleagues. Now we have time for some Q&A. So the chat is open and the Q&A is open, so we'd love to take your questions. I am also going to launch a quick poll because we have some questions for you. So as you type in those questions to us for Eric to respond to or for Mark and I to respond to, please take a moment to share your feedback on this session.
While folks do that, here's a question that came through. This is for Eric. Eric, can you talk about just some of the basics of actually placing a standing order? I think this question is referring to the actual process when the orders are put in, how you do that and how you went about that process of setting maximum volumes in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So after you configure your order according to whatever your segments are, I mean, for example, with me here at Oregon Tech, we segment the same market by cohort, so sophomore, junior, and then a separate order for seniors. You place those two separate orders, and then later in your ordering process, you can actually put the name volume limit in the order itself when you set up the recurrence.
Great, Eric, and that you brought up in your presentation that some of your orders are monthly, some of your orders are set up as the data loads. Can you talk just briefly about the difference between those two options and why you made decisions that you made for those selections?
Yeah, if you are using IMC, and this is the hand raiser service, these are in my view, students who are coming similar to a student who's coming to our request for information and submitting a form. You want to engage and follow up with that student immediately. The best, closest option with IMC in standing up your search is the monthly load. So we are making sure that for every student who raises his or her hand, comes in via IMC, within that month, we are following up with that student and recognizing that student for putting Oregon Tech on their big future list. So that's the IMC piece. The standing orders piece, we do as the data loads. And just in terms of our communications calendar, it has really helped us be pretty laser beam focused on what messaging we want out and how quickly we can turn it around once that new record comes into Slate and is placed within that population in about a day.
Wonderful. And just to add a little bit more insight from the College Board perspective on that, the as the data load selection basically means that it lines up to our data load calendar. So you're going to be getting those deliveries on those particular days. Monthly is always delivered the first Monday of every month. So that's something that you all can consider as you think about your strategy. We're getting some more questions in, Eric. One question, and I think this is a really good one because I remember being in this position when I was on campus. Talk a little bit more about getting campus buy-in from your leadership and specifically your colleagues who manage the budget.
As much data visualizations as I can possibly provide, and those historical reports that come with segment analysis have been really the building block of that data visualization. And really sharing the descriptors available in the definitions provided for each cluster combo has been really helpful for the senior university leadership as well as the board when I get in front of them to understand what type of student we want to recruit and also what might be some realistic goals for a new type of student to bring more consistently year over year. So whatever in any data visualization that I can pull out of those historical reports really is the starting block, but I have also been able to provide out of Slate some of the engagements we have off of an individual student's timeline to really demonstrate this is how we are proactively going after certain students within these certain clusters and combos to meet our institutional goals.
Great, thanks, Eric. Question about your Search Deliver campaign. Can you talk about how your Search Deliver campaign looks compared to your inquiry nurturing campaigns?
That's a great question. So it's been an evolving process and quite a bit of fun. I'll start off with the inquiry nurturing campaign. Those are actually driven in Slate Speak by population timestamp days filter, which we purposely configure to follow after a new name is brought into Slate as a prospect, about 7 to 10 days, depending upon the prospect in the market. So the inquiry nurturing campaigns are really just putting information about the student's area of interest that we have clustered around certain themes like engineering or health sciences, for example, based upon the first through third major selections that a student can select when opting into search or signing up for an assessment. So population timestamp days filter for the inquiry nurturing. The search campaign is actually much more simple, and really we do that by the person created date, or the what you call the prospect status created date in Slate. So if it's a new name, within that next day, 24 hours or so, as long as we got it finalized, configured, and scheduled, that new name will meet the filter criteria and get whether it's an email or the postcard schedule to be sent out immediately. So in other words, it's not necessarily a drip campaign for the search campaign. It is more of a messaging by the creation of the person record in Slate and whether it's new. And then what we, of course, do, as long as the student's not opted out for later messaging, they're going to continue to receive that next month's message.
Great, Eric. A couple more questions that are Slate focused here. You talked about how you determine engagement, so pretty specific Slate question here. Are you tracking a prospect change conversion? Date diff is the specific field, I believe, relative to each of your standing orders.
Not relative to each of the standing orders, because that would be 12 to 22 different kind of queries or reports that we would have to figure, but it's certainly something that I would find value in time. I just don't think we are there yet. We have plenty of other fun system integrations and kind of reporting pieces to make sure we've got locked down first. But it is a valuable question. I can foresee how that would inform future search orders and standing orders once you get some of those metrics.
Great. And then just another follow-up question on duplicate records, how you handle duplicate records after import into Slate.
That is a great question. And there was back in December with the data load, there were some issues that we had to work through with our loads. But here's the beautiful thing about Slate. Don't overthink it. First name, last name, date of birth, email. If that matches, it's going to match. Fuzzy matches, yes, are easily handled in Consolidate Records. And to quickly answer, no, we never manipulate the file we get from College Board. We literally drag and drop it in. And I have our data quality specialist who's always ready to go for the Consolidate Records. But the Consolidate Records, I mean, the fuzzy matches are quite small because of the behind the scenes, out of the box search matching that Slate already does.
Great. And I'm going to give Eric a break from talking here and pitch this next one over to you, Mark. Eric talked a lot about how he uses segment analysis service in his ordering and order strategy. Can you just give everyone a pretty high-level view of what SAS is and how it works for those who may not be using it or who are familiar with that tool?
Yeah, absolutely happy to try to address that in a short time frame. So segment analysis is essentially a geodemography tool that takes a look at historically where you've had success and where maybe you would like to have success but weren't quite as strong as you'd like to be. And it looks at that information at a student level and breaks that information down into what we call clusters that are high school clusters and neighborhood clusters. That historical data gives you the baseline you need then when you actually build your orders in Surge, to select students that have that come from the clusters that are most productive for your institution or that are aspirational for your institution. You heard Eric talk about cluster combination 8365. What he's referencing there is neighborhood cluster 83, high school cluster 65. Those students perform very, very well for Oregon Tech. So what we would do with segment analysis is we would help you do an analysis for you guys of what clusters and what cluster combinations are most impactful for your institution. And then when you use segment analysis, you can actually order names based on those clusters. So it allows you to get very, very targeted very quickly. And, I think at the outset, it sounds like a very complicated process, but Eric pointed out, you don't have to be a data scientist to use it. We provide a lot of support at the College Board to help institutions. So anybody who's interested in that aspect of search and really being more targeted, segment analysis can be a great tool, especially, I believe, in your secondary and tertiary markets.
Thanks, Mark. And here's a follow-up question on that. It's about content strategy for one cluster versus another in segment analysis. So Eric, certainly if you want to speak to this, do you use the insight you get from clusters to message differently? Any kind of creative uses that you've employed on your campus to get that message across in a customized way? Mark, if you want to add anything there too from institutions you've worked with, I think that's a good thing to hit here.
Sure, I wouldn't mind. Our primary market here is in Oregon. We're a public institution. We do have our access mission geared toward Oregonians. And I call it the priority recruit strategy in our app gen. And so we do some print messaging, especially to the 83, 65, and some other 83 combos with high school clusters, really hitting home the social mobility, the economic ladder, the value, the outcomes. Because again, we're a people's polytechnic. I mentioned that before. Our demographic, our bread and butter truly is more traditional, more blue collar, very loan averse. So we really do our best to hit home hard the value proposition in our primary market, which actually does extend a little bit into upper Northern California. If you're familiar with the demography here in the West, that upper Northern California and Southern Oregon are more alike than upper Northern California and the rest of the state. So yeah, I call it the priority recruit messaging that we do in our app gen that has resonated very well.
Yeah, I think Eric, you covered that question really well, and I'll just add, having worked with a number of different campuses on segment analysis, I do think that the folks that have really a good understanding of the data and of their markets do some variation on the messaging based on the cluster itself. That might be something that you really need to think about if you first are starting with segment analysis, until you know a little bit more about how those messages are received. But, testing and trying different things is kind of the name of the game in some of these aspects. I do think what Eric shared is really, really strong there. So thank you.
Wonderful. Well, that's all the time we have for today, folks. Thanks for the great questions and the great discussion. Eric, thank you for your time and your willingness to share your story with our colleagues across the U.S. and internationally who have logged in today. We will certainly look forward to hearing from you and assisting you with your strategies. So feel free to reach out as you need anything at all. Thanks everyone for your time.